The kitchen is where I feel the absolute most confident in my life. I don't mean that like my food is amazing or everything I make tastes perfect or it's beautiful. I feel confident because I know that if something goes wrong or if I'm out of an ingredient or, anything like that, I can figure it out. I have the skills and the experience to manage that moment. And that helps me build a lot of trust.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the show. I have such a great episode for you today, all about building trust in ourselves in the kitchen and really out of the kitchen, and how we can become more intuitive cooks. I speak with New York Times best-selling cookbook author Julia Turshen. She's the author of 5 cookbooks, including her latest, What Goes With What. She also publishes a weekly newsletter and teaches online cooking classes. I'm actually giving away a free copy of Julia's latest book, What Goes With What, in the newsletter. So I've included a link in the show notes. Be sure to hop over there so that you can enter to win. Well, the topic of today's episode is about intuitive cooking. Julia and I start by talking about intuitive eating. She opens up about her journey towards finding a happier, healthier relationship with her body and how intuitive eating helped. It's less about this goal, like quote unquote, of intuitive eating, and more about letting go of the ways in which we're conditioned around food in order to find body autonomy and pleasure in eating. So much of this comes down to trusting ourselves. And the kitchen can be a powerful way to build that trust muscle in ourselves. Julia offers tips for becoming a more intuitive cook, sharing the practices, rituals, and even appliances that she loves that help her to find more ease in the kitchen. This ease helps us to find more trust and comfort as cooks, helping us find more pleasure in the process of cooking, in the experimenting, tasting, and playing. I think you're going to walk away with a whole new perspective on cooking, along with real, practical, applicable tips on how you can find more joy as a cook. If you're looking for more support in building that trust within yourself, I'm here to help. In my one-on-one sessions, I work with clients to help them uncover the blocks and challenges they're having around cooking and eating, tapping into their intuition and their human design in order to help them find more peace and pleasure in the kitchen. I will include a link in the show notes if you want to learn more about those sessions. And finally, if you find today's episode helpful or inspiring, I really hope you'll consider supporting it. This ad-free podcast could not happen without community support. It's just you and me here making all of this happen. An easy way you can support it is by sharing it with your friends or your family members. You can rate the podcast on your podcast app. That's actually super helpful. And you can become a subscriber to the Mind, Body, Spirit, Food newsletter, where I dive into some of these topics deeper. I also share brand new weekly recipes, all of which just happen to be gluten-free. And if you become a paid subscriber for just a few bucks a month, like the cost of a cappuccino, you make all of this work happen. It truly cannot happen without paid support. I'm so grateful for all of you. As a paid subscriber, you get access to the full recipe archive, you get discounts on those one-on-one sessions, and a lot of other fun perks. Again, I'll include a link if you want to check that out. Thank you to all of you for being here and for listening. And without further ado, let's get into the show. Well, Julia, welcome to the show. I am so excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, Nicki, thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to it.
So I'm going to start by asking you the first question I ask all of my guests, and that is, what is your cultural upbringing and how has that influenced your relationship to food?
Yeah, I love this question. I love hearing other people answer it. Thinking about my own cultural upbringing, I would say, I guess, a couple of answers. Yeah, I was born in New York City and spent the early part of my life in New York City, raised, I would say, in equal measure by my Jewish American New Yorker parents and my babysitter, who is like my other parent, who I'm still very close to, Jenny, who's from St. Vincent, which is a small country in the Caribbean. And I would say those forces combined really shaped my upbringing and definitely informed the foods that I find most comforting and make me feel most like home.
What are some of those foods?
Well, it's bagels and lox and diners and like Chinese and Japanese takeout. And it's also like stewed oxtails and roti and all of that kind of stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you grew up in the city. I didn't realize that. How did that inform your exposure to food, your passion for food? Did you have a passion for food at a young age?
Yeah, I definitely had a passion for food at a young age. I always sort of say and joke that I can't remember not being into food. I really just have always been pretty obsessed with it. Not to use like an overused word, but it's really been like the guiding force my whole life is just my interest in food. I think spending the early part of my childhood in New York City had a lot to do with that. Just exposure to so many different kinds of food, the ease of access to so many different kinds of food. We moved to the suburbs when I was in middle school, just like half an hour away, and I was not thrilled about it. I mean, I had a great experience in the suburbs and a nice educational experience. You know, I'm grateful for it, but I spent all of like middle school and high school trying to get back to New York City. I had a box in my closet in my bedroom in the house I grew up in that just said in like black marker, like for my future apartment. And I don't know even what I would put in there, but I was not a kid who fantasized about anything like that I felt like other kids were fantasizing about, you know, prom or growing up and getting married one day or anything like that. I like dreamt about apartments.
That's amazing.
And then what's so funny is that, so I went to college in Manhattan. I stayed in Manhattan. I said I would never leave the island.
Right.
Then I met Grace, who I'm married to. Grace lived in Brooklyn at the time. So I crossed the river, which was like a big deal. And then about a year or so after we got married, we moved to the Hudson Valley, where we've lived for a little over a decade now. And I'm so happy out of the city, which just continues to surprise me. But anyway,
so
that's a tangent.
I love it. I'm in the Hudson Valley as well. We're about an hour from each other. We were just chatting about that. But it is a magical place to live. Although opposite of you, I vowed the one place on earth I would never live was New York City, and ended up moving there with my boyfriend from college who became my husband. But I lasted 5 years, and then I was like, get me the hell out of here.
The city's changed a lot, like post-COVID and everything. But I mean, I still will always just feel New York City is like the best city in the world. But I also think it's an incredibly hard place to live. And I think it's gotten even harder to live in just financially. And it's a hard place to cook too. I feel like,
well, I want to ask you about that. If you could just briefly describe your journey to becoming a New York Times bestselling food writer. Where did that start and how did this career begin?
Sure. Yeah. I was worried I was just going off on such a tangent about where I grew up and where I live, but I think it all actually plays into this. So my parents both worked in publishing when I was growing up. They mostly worked in magazines. They met working at a magazine. My mom hired my dad. She was an art director. He was a graphic designer. And so I grew up like surrounded by print media. My parents were constantly bringing books and magazines home. They were of the generation, my dad especially, doing what he does now. He runs his own like book design studio. And my parents actually designed my last book, which was such a thrill to work with him. But my dad is of the like generation that like literally cut and paste. And my parents, I just feel like weekends in my childhood and weekday evenings, I mean, my parents were just constantly working. So when they weren't in their offices, they were bringing home papers. They were cutting them up and placing them and figuring out how to put things together. So I just was just embedded in seeing people make printed matter. And when I would go to my parents' like offices after school or something like that, you know, I was hanging out. I will mention quickly, we have a bird. I hear him. I don't know if you can hear him.
So I'm looking out my window. It is the dead of winter in the Hudson Valley. I'm like, where is she?
Yep. I just heard him. I was hoping he'd be quiet. But
no,
if anyone listening hears, you're like, is the bird outside of my car or my window? No, it's in my house and he's fine. And I just apologize for the noise.
Makes me happy.
He's a handful. Okay, so I just grew up in the world of like magazines and book design. I got to go into like magazine offices as just like where I would go hang out with my parents. And I also had this, as we talked about briefly, I had this great love for and interest in food my whole life. A lot of adults in my life when I was growing up, because they knew how much I loved to cook and I was cooking all the time and talking about it, they all asked me like, oh, do you want to have a restaurant one day? And I just knew from a very young age, like restaurants were not at all something I was interested in. It's not the business that speaks to me. I think it's so hard and I like going to them. I don't want to be responsible for one. Yeah. But I just always wanted to combine my love of writing and print media with my love of cooking. I knew that really early on, which is a very unusual thing to know.
Yeah.
And I think part of why I knew that I wanted that was because I knew it was an option because I got to see people making books and magazines. So that early exposure and just, knowledge, I think obviously has been a great privilege in my life just to, know those things and know those people. So I never went to culinary school. I'm totally self-taught. But what I did study and pay a lot of attention to in my, I guess, educational background was writing. I was like a writing major in school. Well, the school I went to, you couldn't really major in writing. You could major in English and have like a concentration in writing.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I guess that's sort of like the early start. But then when I was in college, because I went to college in New York City, I had a lot of proximity to food media. So I was interning at food magazines. I interned at Food and Wine. I worked part-time for a guy who produced PBS shows about food. That led to my first job, which was working on the companion cookbook for a PBS show about cooking. And one thing just kind of led to another. And I feel like the easiest way to describe my kind of odd and funny career is that I have never written a resume. It's all been like word of mouth.
Wow.
And I've always just worked on projects, with the exception of one farm season in 2021 when I worked at my friend's vegetable farm, which actually I did write a resume for them because it was required on their application, even though they're my friends. With the exception of that job, when I worked full-time for the farm crew for the farm season, with the exception of that, I've never had like a normal job. I've never had like a 9 to 5. I've been a freelancer forever. And it's been, project to project, word of mouth, like knowing editors and stuff like that. And then, after a long time of working with other people on their cookbooks, I worked as a co-author and assistant on other cookbooks. I did my own first cookbook. It came out in 2016. And I've continued to do my own books, some collaborative books. And for the last couple of years, I've also introduced a few other things, which I'm loving, including I teach these online cooking classes and I write a Substack newsletter. And having both of those things going on in my life has made me feel a little less dependent on books, which has been honestly just a relief. I've continued to do books, but I'm not feeling like my whole career and self-worth and everything is wrapped up in them. So
I just love these stories because there's always the puzzle. You can kind of see within anybody's life story, all those puzzle pieces fit together in such an interesting and magnetic way. One thing that you've been really open about in your writing and in your newsletter is your relationship with your body over the years. And I find it so interesting, myself included, been in the food industry for over 20 years. And I too had a troubled relationship with my body for many, many years when I was younger. And it so informs what I do now. I can look back with such gratitude for that experience. And I would not be sitting here doing this if not for that and the healing that went into. I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how it informs your work today.
Sure. Yeah, I'm so glad you're asking about this. I'm so glad you talk about it in your work. And I appreciate what you just shared. I think it's something so many of us who work in and around food share. The more I've talked about this, the more I've heard from other people who work in and around food about having similar experiences. And to be clear, I guess to say what my experience has been, is I always had what I described as like a tricky relationship to food and my body after a lot of various types of support, including like various types of therapy and, all that kind of stuff. I've come to understand that like for a very long time, I lived with a pretty serious eating disorder, which I just thought was like how people got through life. Pretty like serious and like debilitating body image stuff. And a lot of it, very kind of like socially accepted. So that has been my, I would say, sort of like personal journey of figuring out, but it has been something I've talked about more in my work in the past few years. And when I started doing that, I'm having like a million thoughts at the same time right now. But one is understanding that this is something a lot of people in food share, because I think a lot of us come to food because it's the word I used right when we started, we are like obsessed with food. And I think that type of interest and obsession can have a lot of different sides to it. And I think a lot of that interest and obsession can be incredibly positive and curious. And I think a lot of it can come from having a pretty disordered relationship with food and paying so much attention to it. So I'm not saying this is your experience, but you sharing what you shared, like I just appreciate it because it is something I think rings true for a lot of people who work in food. To answer your question, which was
no,
like
I think
became part of my work.
You just answered it, and I've never heard anyone describe things in that way, and I couldn't agree more. It's an obsession, and that obsession is so beautiful, and so creative, and because of the conditioning around food, I think this played a large part in my story. Because of the conditioning that I experienced around food and body image, that passion for food got really distorted. It was so subtle. It happened, so subtly throughout my teen years that all of a sudden, when I kind of hit rock bottom, I was studying abroad in France as a student. And I was like, what the hell? Food was simultaneously the biggest joy. France, like so many stories, it woke me up. It exposed me to all the things. I was just in the happiest time. And at the same time, more stressed than I've ever been, and probably the hardest time of my life. Like both of those things were happening at the exact same time, all because of this obsession. And one of it was really dark and one of it was really light. But so interesting, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just sitting here nodding, like I totally get it. And I would say the kind of most challenging time in my life, I would say the couple of years when I was at my sort of lowest, when it came to my behaviors around what I was eating, how I was treating myself, how I viewed myself, those years also corresponded with some of the most exciting years of my work life. And it was like when my first books came out. And, here I was talking about and writing about and taking photos of such beautiful food and memories. And it was so incredibly positive. And I was also making a career of like literally measuring it down to like the half teaspoon and imposing so much control on it and writing recipes with precision and feeling like, oh, if I can control this thing, that makes me so, I don't know what the right word is, upset, scared, confused. If I can control it, if I can present it, wrap it up with a pretty bow, literally put it in a beautiful book, then maybe it will all be okay. And I had to get to a point where I was like, oh, it's not okay. And I still love those books. Like my first solo cookbooks are very near and dear to me. I cook from them a lot. Sometimes, especially my second one now and again, because the year a book comes out isn't like necessarily the year you're making it. So when I look at that book, just to be totally honest, that book kind of coincided with like some pretty hard times. Like I have a hard time looking at that book now, even though I love it. And I love the recipes and menus and everything. So I'm in this sort of funny position of a lot of my work is, kind of forward facing. I put a lot of myself into my work. So when I look back now at my books and the various work I've put out, I can see this kind of trajectory and going from this place of feeling like, I think in my first books, wanting to sort of prove myself, wanting to show a lot of control over, precise amounts and stuff. And then my more recent work has become a lot more relaxed. And that comes through in subtle ways, like the way I measure things and the way I talk about serving sizes and just saying like, instead of telling you, how much chop parsley in a cup measurement or a tablespoon measurement, like I just say a handful because that's what I do. I'm not ever measuring it. And it doesn't matter if it's like a little less or a little more. So things like that are like tiny moments, but I do think make a difference. Yeah, I've changed the way I describe serving sizes because who am I to say how much anyone should be eating? And I don't know, when you see a serving size in a book, like, are you talking about a young child? Are you talking about a professional athlete?
Yeah.
Like, whose appetite are we talking about? What were the other things you ate today? Like, there's just
so much.
I can't say it serves 4. Like, that means sort of nothing. So I try to just say, like, if I can give you the amount of something, like this makes like 3 quarts of soup, I'll just tell you that. If not, I just say, like, it serves about 4. And, you can make your informed decision from there.
You have a quote in the intro of your new book, What Goes With What? And it's, you actually can do anything you want. I want to shout to my readers' kitchens. There's no one right way to make anything. It's a magnet I wish I could put on everyone's refrigerator. And I love that quote so much because I totally feel it. As recipe developers, there are times when I'm sure you have students and readers who just want the precise exact thing. But our job, my job, and I totally want to get into this with you because we share similar missions here, is to teach people to trust themselves.
Yeah.
And so I want to get into intuitive cooking because that's going to be the topic for today's conversation.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I just feel like we need to touch on intuitive eating. Because as you mentioned, what sparked this conversation was one of your wonderful newsletters talking about this gap that we have. And intuitive eating is great if you can get to the point where you can authentically sense when you're hungry and feed yourself what you want to eat. That is a really liberated place to be. And yet there's this gap between getting to that place and then having the skills to actually prepare the foods that your body authentically wants. And of course, we have a million options when it comes to food. We don't necessarily have to cook food. We could buy food. But again, there is this sense of liberation when you have the skills to give your body what it is asking for.
Yeah, definitely.
As far as intuitive eating for you, before we get into intuitive cooking, what are some things that have helped you on that path?
Yeah. I'm so glad we're talking about this. And I feel like, we could talk about so many things. I feel like just in what we've been talking about, I could go in so many directions and have so many thoughts, but I think this is a wonderful place for us to focus. So I appreciate you bringing us there. Yeah. I feel like this word is so overused, but I can't think of another. In my journey towards just like a kinder relationship with myself and my body, intuitive eating has been one of the tools that's helped a lot. And I mean that in terms of like capital I, capital E, intuitive eating, like the book, the people behind it, Evelyn and Elise, like listening to them, reading their work has been very helpful and eye-opening, but also just lowercase, like intuitive eating, just eating more intuitively. Yeah, it has been very helpful, but I appreciate you kind of introducing some nuance into it because I think sometimes it's seen as this like ultimate goal. And I guess overall what's been most helpful for me is just trying to release myself of like quote unquote like ultimate goals. Like to me that just feels like how I was when I was trying to just make my body smaller at all costs. How I was when I tried to measure my professional success by like how much money did I make or how many books did I sell. Like I just tried to not have things be so black and white.
What you were saying, I love because it's intuitive eating. Oh God, I just love this so much. It's not about the goal of getting to intuitive eating. At least for me, the goal was just to let go and shed all of the conditioning around food so I could just follow the impulses of my body.
Yeah. And I think what you brought up before and what I've written about and what I think about a lot is I think in shedding that stuff that you just mentioned, I think we get closer to whatever you want to call it, like our intuition or just our self-trust. And I think that is like really powerful because I know one of the things that decades of just being really hard on myself and hard on my body and constantly dieting and restricting and all these things, one of the effects of that was that my trust in myself felt like completely eroded. And I had this feeling of like, oh, if I don't follow all these different things and keep track of things. And yeah, a lot of, I don't want to get like into eating disorder, like triggery stuff, but like a lot of what I did was like tracking and restricting. And I felt like if I didn't do that, like I just would go off the rails. What those rails were, where I was going wasn't clear to me. I felt so scared. I felt like I absolutely could not trust myself. And I think that is just such a awful thing that diet culture like inflicts on so many of us, is feeling like we can't trust ourselves. And I think it's way bigger than the size or shape of our bodies. I think it's, I mean, to me, it's just like total like misogyny and patriarchy and white supremacy. It's like a way to control people by making them feel like they can't trust themselves. And that might sound like really heavy and like, what? How did she just get there? But I do think it's true when you really understand the history of dieting and how it came to be so major. It's a way to, control our bodies and our minds and keep us from these things that we, kind of have that like spidey sense of like something's a little off here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And getting in touch with that, I think, is really powerful.
And I'm going to direct listeners, and I'll link to my episode with Elise Moonen, who really talks about this history of the patriarchy and its webs of effect. And it is a system designed to control. And so that conversation might be helpful for people who are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
She does a good job of explaining all of that, because it's absolutely true. And I think for you and I, it's like, my medium is food because I love the creativity behind food. But really my mission is to encourage, to help people find their sovereignty, not just as eaters, but as humans. Yeah. Like really it goes there. Like I go that far.
And I'm glad you do, because it's true. And I think we discount what happens in our kitchens. And I think we've been taught to do that. And I think we also, and I include myself in this, like I think we're complicit in that. It's like, oh, it's just food. It's not a big deal. Like, oh, just, jump to the recipe, like skip all this stuff. And I think day in, day out, just for, the daily labor of feeding ourselves, like sometimes we're not thinking about the like societal or political implications of these decisions, but it really does attach to all of this. And I think what we're doing in our kitchens is really important work. And when I say our kitchens, I specifically mean like home kitchens. Like I mentioned when you asked me about my background, like I'm not a restaurant person. I didn't go to culinary school. Like I am a very proud home cook. And I define my work as, being a home cook who writes for other home cooks. Like that's the lane I'm in, that I'm delighted to be in. And that's the place I can speak with, just lived experience. And I just think home cooks don't realize how important the work they do is. And it's, it sustains ourselves and whoever lives with us, whether it's, family, friends, roommates, kids, whoever it is, that's kind of obvious. But also just like the act of preparing food day in, day out, like having a home kitchen that's running well and serving you means, you're in touch with your community, where are you getting the food from, all that kind of stuff. And it means like you have this place to exercise so much trust. The kitchen is where I feel the absolute most confident in my life. I don't mean that like my food is amazing or everything I make tastes perfect or it's beautiful. I feel confident because I know that if something goes wrong or if I'm out of an ingredient or, anything like that, I can figure it out. I have the skills and the experience to manage that moment. And that helps me build a lot of trust. Like when I teach my classes, I used to feel really nervous about like, oh, what if I screw something up? Like I'm not recording this and editing it. I'm doing it live, like over Zoom with people. So like, what happens if I get something wrong? And then I learned to just embrace those moments because I was like, oh, I get things wrong all the time. And so does everyone. So we can just together be like, oh, that happened. And like, here's how I'm going to get through this. Or does anyone have any ideas? And I think the more we share that kind of thing, I mean, it doesn't have to be a live cooking class, but the more we share that kind of moment, the more transparent we are. I just think there's something like a little radical in there that I really like.
I love it so much. I have a book coming out that's actually done. Well, we're in the design process right now next year, but it's all about bringing intention into the kitchen with the mission of allowing cooking to be this form of self-exploration and a way to connect back to ourselves and to find trust and to release the hold on any outcome and just use the process of cooking as a form of I hate all these words. I'm like, I don't want to use that one. I don't want to use that one. Like meditation,
no
self-care,
sure.
like wellness. Like I hate all those words, but you know what I mean? Like use these, the act of cooking can be far more than just getting food on the plate if we allow it.
Yeah. It's also a source of pleasure, which I think we sometimes forget to talk about in these conversations. I'm not saying you are, I just know I do sometimes, which I think is also really powerful. And it's also like a place where we can play. I don't know. I'm thinking about, I was just visiting my best friend who has 2 kids who are also my best friends, and I love them. And I got to go to her 3-year-old's class. I don't know what, I guess it's like basically like pre-K. And I like made these muffins with the kids, which was like so sweet and so fun. Just on a side note, if anyone needs to know this, who doesn't know, like one of the best things to make with kids is ice cream bread, where you take a pint of melted ice cream, any flavor, we just use vanilla, because ice cream is like eggs, sugar, milk, like it's things you'd put like in, a muffin. And then my best friend lives in England, so I was there. So there you can use self-rising flour, which we don't always get in America, but a cup and a half of self-rising flour and a pint of melted ice cream mixed together. And then you can bake it as a bread or like in muffins.
What?
And it's just perfect. It's like the best thing to make with kids. And you can mix in anything. We did like a lemon blueberry, a chocolate chip. If you don't have self-rising flour, you can just use flour and like baking powder. Anyway, that was a tangent.
That was an amazing tangent.
But I just feel like I didn't come up with this. It's on the internet. I just think like everyone needs to know about this because it's so easy. And kids are like, ice cream bread. Like, I'm mentioning it because I walked into this classroom and there was this moment where we were talking about like the kids had little aprons that I guess they use for when they do like arts and crafts and stuff. So we were talking about whether or not they should wear them. We were having this whole conversation about that. And I was just thinking about like how it's built into little kids' classrooms, these opportunities to get like messy and to be playful and to try different things. And I just was thinking like, when was the last time I wore like a smock? Like, or like was encouraged to like make a mess with paint or whatever it is. And my spouse, Grace, and I, we don't have kids. So I'm, probably people who do are used to this and would like things to be less messy. But I've just been thinking about that a lot, and this like encouragement to just get in there with your hands, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and there's no expectation for it to be perfect, and to just be playful. And our kitchens give us this place to do it. Like, we can try different things. If it doesn't turn out great, like whatever, it's probably still edible, or it's just one meal, So it's a place to try things and not get them right, which I think is in this sort of trust building idea is important, because I think we don't build trust by nailing it every time.
So I want to get into some like really practical, tangible tips that you have for building trust and becoming a more intuitive cook. Like, what are some of the simple, practical stuff? Is there equipment? Are there ingredients? All that good stuff.
So the thing at the top of the list I wrote, I don't have the list in front of me, but I remember, I probably should. The thing at the top of the list was, which I like talk about and write about a lot, is just how much I love my air fryer. I will just say, no one needs an air fryer. It's not like an essential tool, but I was reluctant to get one. But I did finally get one a couple of years ago, and I use it almost every day. And that comes with a disclaimer that I'm mostly only ever just cooking for 2 adults. It's like mostly just for me and Grace. Like, I don't think they're great if you're cooking for a ton of people, just because they're not huge. But I just think it offers me this ease and kind of fluency of, especially when it comes to cooking vegetables. I mean, I eat everything, but I think it's like the best tool for cooking vegetables. And you can just basically take any vegetable, like potato, green bean, broccoli, like whatever, just put a little like oil and salt on it, throw it in there, and in like 15 minutes or less, you have like the best roasted kind of crispy thing, which of course you can do in an oven. or you can steam these things or do whatever. But especially if you use like a parchment liner in an air fryer, like you clean up nothing. Like there's nothing to clean up. It cooks quickly. It heats quickly. There's not this moment of like waiting for your oven to preheat. It's just fast and easy. And it allows me, again, in that sort of day-to-day cooking to just practice a lot of like intuitive cooking. That's, for me, I guess that means, with intuition, but also just with like ease and without overthinking. And like those are some of the ways I would describe how I feel when I'm feeling in touch with my instincts. There's not too much like hemming and hawing. I don't have to look up a recipe. I don't have to Google anything. I can just turn it on, put the food in, and know, it's going to be ready in like 10 minutes, which I just love.
I love that. I don't have an air fryer, but
it's okay.
I have it. I know. I'm like,
okay.
I do have a toaster oven, and we use that all the time. Because similarly, like my kids cook in there. It's just so similar. But another thing that I know you mentioned, and which I've written about in my newsletter, I write about in my book, is just salting to taste, and how that in and of itself, like I don't include salt measurements in my recipes either, unless it's a baked good, and that can be important.
Yeah.
But it is because that tiny little action of salting to taste, to your taste, there is no right way. There is no wrong way. It's just a way that tastes good to you. And that in and of itself can be a way to build trust in the kitchen. And that can lead to other things. I think playing with spices and herbs, I'm always encouraging my kids to do this. Like even if they're just making oatmeal, open the spice store and be like, play. Like add a little pinch of there, smell it, add it, taste it, see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I once heard, I think it was Mark Bittman who said, in terms of like knowing how much salt to add to something, like how do you know? And he said, I'm pretty sure it was him. I hope I'm attributing this correctly. I think it was. He said, how do you know how much to turn the steering wheel when you're like going around a curve? Yeah. And I just think it's like the best description. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I guess if you don't know how to drive, maybe that's hard. But for anyone who does, I feel like that kind of sums it up. Like you can't really define it and you just kind of do it. And I think trusting yourself and knowing, again, like we've been repeating, like there's not a right way. There's not a right amount. There's like the amount that tastes good to you. And learning to trust that and not defer to someone else to tell you what you like. I just feel like there's, that's obviously not just about salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing you say in the intro to your book as well is your action of putting a wet paper towel underneath your cutting board is your intention, is what you call it, which is amazing because that's kind of the focus of my new book. But it becomes this intention of, here, I'm setting up this space. Now this space is meaningful. And I talk about, I have a ritual. I've done a whole episode on rituals, but I have a ritual of tying on an apron, much like those kids. Tying on that apron just allows me to get messy in the kitchen, which I didn't allow myself to get for a very long time. Yeah. But are there other things you do to like, I guess I'm talking about how we set things up, and it can be a mental shift. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical shift, but are there other things you do to like just set it up so that the cooking happens with more ease?
Yeah, totally. The thing of the cutting board that I described in the book, it's the first thing I do in every class I teach is just putting a damp towel under your cutting board. For anyone who doesn't know, it keeps it from moving around on your counter. And it's the kind of thing I've always done, but haven't always thought to like let people know in a cookbook. And I was like, no, this kind of thing's important because one, I mean, it just makes things safer. It's nice to chop on something that's not moving around. But it is this sort of like intention setting thing. So some other things I do like that are, if I'm going to be in the kitchen for a while, like if I'm doing like a bunch of batch cooking or I'm teaching a class or something like that, this might sound really silly, but I try to remember to put shoes on because I'm like in my life at home, I live a very barefoot life at home. Like I come in, I kick off my shoes and I'm walking around in my socks or bare feet or slippers. But I'll be 40 this year. And I have noticed over the past few years that, my back hurts if I'm not wearing like supportive shoes. So if I'm going to be in the kitchen for a while, I'm always like, oh, right, put shoes on, put sneakers on, whatever. So that serves me really well. Another thing is often for me putting music on. It just totally changes the atmosphere. And, I get, in a wonderful way, I get very lost in cooking. I love it. I could do it for hours and hours. And yeah, so setting the tone of that room to accommodate that is important. And for me, yeah, music can inform a lot of that. And I listen to like all different kinds of stuff. I'm like the last person who still uses Pandora because it still works for me. I don't know. So I put on, there's a few reggae stations I love. I listen to the Dinner Party Soul station a lot. So,
I love it.
my cooking music. And sometimes I make phone calls while I'm cooking. Like I'll talk to my mom or Jenny, who's my babysitter when I was growing up, who I mentioned. I talk to her a lot when I'm cooking because I like having my hands busy. So I'll have headphones in. So those are some of the things I do to kind of set up that actually have nothing to do with.
That's what I love because I think that's what people are going to expect you to say. Well, you're going to get out your olive oil and your mise en place dishes. And it's like, yes, maybe, but not really. That's not really what we do. It's not what I do. I literally do the same thing, like tying the apron if I remember to do that. I always am grateful when I do because then it just makes me feel like I can be a little more like messy and free.
No, totally.
Start the music. All those little things make the experience special or they make the experience easier.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of other places in our lives where we do this more kind of obviously, or we realize we're doing it. Like for me, I'm thinking about if I go take my dog for a walk, like I always make sure my headphones are charged and, I'm listening to music or a podcast. And yes, I can walk, go for a walk without those things, but I prefer having those things. Or, we check the weather before we go outside and we decide like which layers we're wearing or if we need gloves or, we put our seatbelts on before we drive. Like, we do these kinds of things. So I think like being aware of how that impacts our time in the kitchen, because I guess I know we're talking about like so many different things and I feel like in a great way, a little scattered today talking to you because there's just so much to talk about. But I guess the heart of what we're talking about and the thing I am always trying to work towards is, having people feel more relaxed cooking at home because I really believe in home cooking and it is like the heartbeat of like my whole life. And I love it. And I feel like so many people are so stressed out about it and so nervous about it and feel uncertain and unsure and like they're doing something wrong or, all these things. And I just feel like I just want to share whatever tools I have found or, have figured out to make that easier. Because I just think it can be just such a pleasant part of our day. And again, I will remind people, I don't have children. So I know that if you're a parent and listening, it might sound different.
I think that I just want to remind us, I'm glad you brought that up because we all go through different stages of our lives and we're going to have different stages in the kitchen. And when our kids are little, it's a time to allow for massive simplicity and to give ourselves the grace for that and to remind ourselves that we can still find joy in the kitchen, but we don't have to be making crazy stuff.
No.
It could just be so simple. And then to trust that those kids are going to grow older. And someday, mine are now 10 and 14. And it's like I found my time. I have my time back. And I can have that space again in the kitchen. So it's all cyclical. And then there might be times when my body is unwell and I simplify again and I still know how to feed myself and I can still trust my body and I can just make it really simple.
Yeah. And whatever it is, if it's illness or having young children or, maybe you have like your parents or grandparents, you're taking care of them or you're just really busy or maybe you're just not that into thinking about food or cooking. And, there are a million reasons, but it turns out we do like need to, and we're lucky to eat every day. So figuring out how to just make that like an easeful, if that's a word, an easy part of our day and to not have the cooking add to the, whatever it is that's not easy, which could be any number of things.
That's what I love about your work, because it's like, how do we make the cooking into a part of our day that brings us pleasure and that brings us satisfaction?
Yeah.
And we have that opportunity every day, 3 times a day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Well, Julia, thank you so much. I will be sure to direct people to your new book. I'm actually going to be giving away a copy of your new book. So everyone head to the newsletter to get the information on how you can enter to win. And I will direct people to your newsletter, like I just said. And I have one more question for you.
Sure,
this is the last question I ask all my guests. It's a fun one. If it were your last meal on earth in this moment, what would it be?
the food,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Although now that you said that, I'm like, well, what else? Tell me.
It's so funny that I like immediately was like, oh, like who's there? Where are we?
Oh, I love
all that kind of stuff. Like I'm like the food. Who cares? Okay, in this moment, without overthinking it,
Yeah.
I am just gonna go with like a real Italian American. Like I feel like I want spaghetti and meatballs, but I also want just like spaghetti with like garlic and oil and lemon and parsley, and I want like a platter of eggplant parmesan, and I want like chicken francaise, and I want tiramisu and all that, and like a lot of red wine. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we should get together and cook all that stuff and not have it be our last meal.
Yes,
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, the first of many. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Yeah, thank you, Nicki. I definitely have a soft spot for a red checkered tablecloth. No, this was so great. I could talk to you like all day about so much, and I'm so thrilled to be like aligned on so much of this stuff with you, and it's nice to connect on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If this work resonates with you in any way, you can support it by leaving a review or comment or sharing it with friends. Also, you can sign up for the newsletter, Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. And by becoming a paid member for just $5 a month, you help fund this entire project. Thank you so much to all of you who are already subscribed, especially to those paid subscribers. This work could not happen without you. I'm Nicki Sizemore, and as always, remember to nourish yourself with intention and love.